Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The crystal stemware clinked as Clayton Mercer arranged each glass with mathematical precision along the burnished mahogany dining table. 6 settings, perfectly spaced at 24 inches apart. The soft glow of the chandelier caught the cut patterns, casting delicate shadows across the crisp white tablecloth. He adjusted the last glass a quarter inch to the left, then stepped back to survey his work. "Val," he called up the curved staircase of their Lincoln Park brownstone. "The Carmichaels will be here in 20 minutes. I heard you the first 3 times, darling." Valencia's voice drifted down, tinged with that particular mixture of honey and vinegar she'd perfected over their 8 years of marriage. Some of us weren't born wearing a pocket protector. Clayton's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "The Carmichaels are looking to list their Gold Coast property. It would be your biggest commission this year, which is precisely why I'm taking my time getting ready. Unlike you, I understand that appearance matters in this business." The sound of her heels clicked against the hardwood floors above. No one trusts a realtor who shops at Target. Clayton ran a hand over his steel-gray tie, smoothing an invisible wrinkle. The tie, like everything else he owned, had been carefully selected for its quality-to-cost ratio. Growing up in a double-wide trailer on the outskirts of Gary, Indiana, had taught him the value of every dollar. It was a lesson Valencia had never learned. Despite, or perhaps because of her family's spectacular fall from grace, his mind drifted to the day he'd paid off her family's debts. Valencia had cried, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she'd watched him transfer the funds. "You're my hero," she'd whispered, pressing herself against him. "I'll never forget this." But she had forgotten, just like she'd forgotten the meaning behind the diamonds now glittering at her throat, his 5-year anniversary gift. These days, she wore them like war trophies, proof of her successful campaign to scale the social ladder she'd once tumbled down. The doorbell chimed at precisely 7 o'clock. Clayton allowed himself a small smile. The Carmichaels were his kind of people. "I'll get it," Valencia called, descending the stairs in a red Valentino dress that probably cost more than his first car. Her dark hair cascaded in perfect waves, and the diamonds caught the light as she moved, each facet reflecting a different lie. She threw open the door with practiced grace. "Margaret Thomas, you look absolutely wonderful. That necklace is stunning, Margaret. Is it vintage?" The Carmichaels stepped into the foyer, followed by the Patels from 3 doors down. Clayton moved forward to shake hands, noting how Valencia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly when she saw their neighbor's wife wearing the same Jimmy Choo heels she'd bought last month. "Welcome, everyone," Clayton said, gesturing toward the living room. "Drinks before dinner?" "Oh, Clayton's quite the mixologist," Valencia laughed, her hand trailing across Thomas Carmichael's arm. "Though I keep telling him he missed his calling as an accountant. He measures every pour like he's conducting an audit." The guests chuckled politely. Clayton moved to the bar cart, his movements precise as he began preparing drinks. Through the antique mirror above the fireplace, he caught Valencia's reflection as she leaned close to Margaret Carmichael. "The property on Astor Street would be perfect for you," Valencia was saying. "The previous owners did a complete renovation last year. The master suite alone is bigger than our entire first floor." As he measured the bourbon for Thomas Carmichael's old-fashioned, Clayton remembered another dinner party years ago. Valencia had been different then, her laughter genuine, her touches seeking connection rather than advantage. That was before she'd started chasing the ghost of her former lifestyle, before the careful mask of contentment had cracked to reveal the hunger underneath. "Clayton?" Valencia's voice cut through his memories. "Thomas would love one of your famous old-fashions." He nodded, reaching for the bourbon. "Coming right up?" The evening progressed like a well-rehearsed play. Valencia held court at the dinner table, regaling their guests with stories about her latest listings while skillfully steering the conversation away from any mention of her Miami past. Clayton watched her work the room, noting how she touched Thomas Carmichael's arm exactly 3 times, enough to flatter, not enough to raise eyebrows. "The market in Lincoln Park is absolutely exploding," she was saying. "I just closed on a property last week at 15% above asking. The key is knowing which properties are worth the investment. She laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a storm. Clayton's always telling me I should be more conservative with my estimates, but sometimes you have to trust your instincts, right? Speaking of investments, Margaret Carmichael said, we heard about that awful situation with the Henderson property. The one where the buyers lost their deposit. Clayton's fork paused halfway to his mouth. This was new information that Valencia's smile didn't waver. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding with the escrow account. All resolved now. She turned to Mrs. Patel. How are you enjoying that Bordeaux? It's from a little vineyard Clayton and I discovered in France last summer. The conversation moved on, but Clayton's mind lingered on Valencia's response. He thought about the night they'd met. At that charity gala 6 months after her father's art-dealing empire had imploded amid accusations of fraud. She'd been wearing blue, he remembered, and laughing too loudly at a hedge fund manager's jokes. I work in compliance, he'd said when she'd asked, expecting her interest to fade like morning dew instead. She'd leaned closer. How fascinating. Tell me more about that. He should have recognized the desperation in her eyes, the way she clutched her champagne glass like a life preserver. But he'd been lonely, and she'd been beautiful. And when she'd kissed him in the coat-check room, her lips had tasted like promises now. Watching her charm their guests, he saw what he'd missed then. The calculation behind every gesture, the way her eyes never quite matched her smile. She was playing a role, just as she had that night at the gala. The only difference was that now he could see the performance for what it was later that night. After the guests had left and Valencia had disappeared upstairs with a handful of Advil and complaints about her shoes, Clayton sat in his home office. The soft glow of his computer screen illuminated his face. As he pulled up their joint account records, the numbers never lied. That was what he loved about them. They were clean, orderly, predictable. Unlike people, unlike his wife, the transaction history told a story Valencia didn't want him to read. Regular transfers to an account he didn't recognize. Wire transfers to offshore locations. And most recently, a series of 5-figure deposits from names he recognized as her clients that he opened another window, pulling up news articles about the Henderson property. The story had been buried in the real estate section, but the details were clear enough. A young couple had lost their entire deposit when the deal fell through, but the money had never been returned. The escrow account had been empty days before. His mouse hovered over a familiar name in the transaction records. Cruz Holdings LLC, Valencia's father's old company, supposedly defunct after the scandal. But here it was, receiving regular payments from accounts Clayton knew belonged to Valencia's clients. The next morning, Valencia was unusually quiet over breakfast. She picked at her avocado toast, her eyes fixed on her phone. Clayton watched her, noting the slight tremor in her hands as she scrolled through her messages. The Carmichael seemed interested, he said carefully. I think you made quite an impression. Oh, yes. She set down her phone, screen down. Margaret texted this morning. They want to list with me. That's wonderful news. He took a sip of coffee. Though I noticed Thomas seemed very impressed by more than just your real estate expertise. Valencia's eyes flashed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all? Clayton stood straightening his tie. Just an observation. You know how detail-oriented I am. He paused, then added, by the way, I noticed some interesting transactions in our accounts. Care to explain why you're moving client funds through your father's old company? The color drained from Valencia's face. You've been spying on me? Spying implies secrecy. I'm simply doing what I do best. Following the money. Those transactions are perfectly legitimate, she snapped. I'm helping clients invest in property portfolios through a defunct company linked to a fraud investigation. Clayton's voice remained calm. That seems unlikely. Valencia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Not everything has to follow your precious rules, Clayton. Some of us understand that success requires flexibility. Is that what you call stealing from your clients? She laughed, a harsh sound nothing like her dinner party charm. God, you're pathetic. Still counting pennies while pretending to be something you're not. You know what your problem is? You've never learned to think big. Clayton gathered his briefcase, pausing to kiss her cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and secrets. Don't forget we have dinner with the Patels on Friday. Actually, I have a showing that evening. You'll have to make my excuses. That evening, after Valencia had left for her showing, Clayton sat in his office again. His computer screen showed a series of deleted text messages he'd recovered from their shared cloud account. Miss you, baby. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same. Val's being extra clingy lately. Think she suspects? No way. She's too busy spending her clients' money. Oh. You still bringing those Cartier cuffs? Winky face, of course. Meet me at the W Hotel. Don't be late. The messages were between Valencia and someone saved in her phone as Kippy. A quick social media search revealed him to be Kip Ralston, a 23-year-old fitness influencer with a penchant for shirtless workout videos and motivational quotes about grinding for greatness. Clayton opened another window, displaying security footage from Valencia's office building. He watched as she met with clients, her body language practiced and reassuring as she presumably explained where their money would be invested. In one video, she stayed late, carefully removing files from cabinets and feeding them into a shredder that he thought about the years he'd spent building his life, brick by careful brick. The night studying for his MBA while working 2 jobs. The careful cultivation of professional relationships. The strategic career moves that had positioned him exactly where he wanted to be. With steady hands, Clayton began typing. First, a series of emails to his offshore accounts, establishing paper trails and alibis. Then, a careful redistribution of their joint assets through a maze of shell companies he'd set up years ago, just in case. Finally, a transfer of $287,000 into their joint account, making sure to leave an easily discoverable trail back to one of Valencia's fake escrow accounts that he thought about the moment he'd first suspected something was wrong. It had been small things at first. Valencia taking calls in the bathroom with the shower running, nervous energy during their monthly budget discussions, unexplained absences that didn't quite match her showing schedule, but Clayton hadn't survived poverty by ignoring details. He'd watched, waited, and prepared. While Valencia thought she was being clever with her embezzlement scheme, he'd been building a fortress of financial safeguards around their assets. The bait was set. Now all he had to do was wait. The text came 3 days later, while he was reviewing compliance reports at work. His phone buzzed once, and Valencia's message appeared, "I want a divorce. Already emptied our joint account. Don't bother begging. You'll only embarrass yourself. Goodbye, bean counter." Clayton allowed himself a small smile as he typed his response. Good luck. Then he opened his cryptocurrency app and executed the failsafe protocol he'd coded when they first opened the joint account. The funds she'd stolen bounced back like a boomerang, landing safely in an account she'd never find. He turned back to his compliance reports, humming softly. The numbers never lied, but people did. And Clayton Mercer had learned long ago that the best way to deal with liars was to let them think they'd won. Through his office window, he could see the Chicago skyline stretching toward a steel-gray sky. Somewhere in that jungle of glass and steel, his wife was probably celebrating her victory with her young lover. Planning their new life together. Let her celebrate. The game was just beginning, and Clayton had always been very, very good at games. After all, compliance wasn't just about following rules. It was about making sure others paid the price when they didn't. The Miami morning hit Valencia Cruz Mercer like a wall of wet heat as she stepped out of her Uber, Kip Ralston close behind with their designer luggage. The South Beach penthouse loomed above them, all glass and promise. Home sweet home, baby, Kip said, his perfectly sculpted arms wrapping around her waist. Can't believe we actually pulled it off. Valencia smiled, fingering the key card in her Hermes bag. Clayton never saw it coming. He was too busy counting pennies to notice the fortune walking out his door. How much did we actually get? Kip's voice held an edge of eagerness that might have worried her if she wasn't riding such a high. 287,000, Valencia said, savoring each syllable. Plus whatever we can squeeze from the real estate deals I've got pending. She turned to face him, running a finger down his chest. Ready to live like royalty? You know it, babe. Kip flashed his Instagram-ready smile. First thing we're doing is hitting the clubs. Show these Miami wannabes how real money parties. First thing we're doing is securing our penthouse, Valencia corrected, her heels clicking against the marble lobby floor. Then shopping. You need a whole new wardrobe to match your new lifestyle. The lobby manager approached them, his starched collar already wilting in the heat. Mrs. Cruz Mercer? I'm Thomas Reeves, the property manager. Welcome to the Meridian. The furnishings have been arranged as I specified. Valencia asked, not bothering to hide her impatience. About that, ma'am? He hesitated, adjusting his tie nervously. There seems to be an issue with the payment authorization. Valencia waved her hand dismissively. Just run it again? The funds are there. We tried several times. The bank is saying, listen. Valencia cut him off, pulling out her phone to show her banking app. I personally transferred the money this morning. The words died in her throat. The screen showed a zero balance. Not a pending transaction. Not a transfer in progress. Just zero. That's impossible, she whispered, fingers flying over the screen as she checked her other accounts. Nothing. Kip peered over her shoulder, his cologne suddenly cloying in the lobby's air conditioning. Babe, what's going on? I don't understand, Valencia said, her voice rising. The money was there. I moved it myself. The manager cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office? Valencia followed him in a daze, her designer heels suddenly unsteady on the marble floor. In the manager's office, the reality of their situation became brutally clear. Your accounts have been frozen, the bank representative said over speakerphone. We've received documentation indicating those funds were obtained illegally. Illegally? Valencia's laugh held an edge of hysteria. That's ridiculous. I'm Valencia Cruz Mercer. My husband is. We've already spoken with Mr. Mercer, the voice replied coolly. He's the one who provided the documentation. Valencia's blood ran cold. She ended the call and turned to Kip, who was slouched in a leather chair, scrolling through his phone with increasing agitation. Baby, he said slowly, you might want to see this. He held out his phone. On the screen was a news article from the Chicago Tribune. High-end real estate scheme uncovered. Multiple clients report missing escrow funds. No, Valencia whispered. No. Her phone buzzed. A text from Clayton. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies? Back in Chicago, Clayton sat in the corner booth of Gibson's Steakhouse, watching Tashing Wynn dissect her filet mignon with surgical precision. His childhood friend had grown from a scrappy scholarship kid into one of the city's most feared divorce attorneys, but some habits never changed. You're telling me, Tasha said, cutting another perfect bite, that you knew about her embezzlement scheme for months and just watched? Not just watched. Clayton sipped his water, ignoring the scotch he'd ordered for appearance's sake. I documented every transaction, every client, every dollar she thought she was hiding, and the money she tried to steal? Counterfeit, Clayton replied, allowing himself a small smile. Digitally speaking, I created a shadow account that looked real, but would dissolve the moment she tried to access it. Every penny she thought she was stealing was fake. Tasha set down her fork, dark eyes studying him. You know, most men just hire a private investigator when they suspect their wife is cheating. Most men didn't grow up watching their parents lose everything to people who thought rules were beneath them. Clayton's voice was quiet but hard. Besides, this was never about the affair. No. Tasha raised an eyebrow. Then what was it about? Justice. Clayton pulled out a thick file and placed it on the table. Valencia didn't just steal from me. She stole from people who trusted her. People like my parents who put their life savings into what they thought were legitimate investments. Tasha opened the file, scanning the documents inside. These escrow accounts. She was using her father's old business connections. Gideon Cruz might be disgraced, but his name still opens doors in certain circles. Valencia used that network to move stolen money through shell companies, making it look like legitimate real estate investments. And her lovers? The young fitness trainer? Clayton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say Kip Ralston isn't as innocent as he appears. Tasha's eyes narrowed. What did you do? I gave a son a chance to know his father, Clayton said softly, and an opportunity to help deliver justice. Understanding dawned on Tasha's face. The fitness trainer is your son? From your teenage relationship. Biology has a way of creating interesting opportunities. Clayton straightened his tie. Now, about that prenup clause. The downtown gym smelled of sweat and ambition when Clayton walked in later that evening. He found Kip in the private training room, recording another workout video for his followers. Remember, guys, Kip was saying to his phone camera, success isn't about luck. It's about seizing opportunities when they present themselves. Like and subscribe for more. He stopped when he saw Clayton. I'll finish this later. By all means, continue, Clayton said, leaning against the wall. I'm sure your followers would love to hear about your latest opportunity. Kip's Instagram-ready smile faltered. Look, I can explain. Explain what? How you followed the plan perfectly. How you made her believe you were just another fame-hungry gym rat looking for a sugar mama. She wasn't supposed to steal from her clients, Kip protested. You said this was about teaching her a lesson about fidelity. Clayton pushed off the wall, moving closer. And you believe that? Come on, son. You're smarter than that. The word hung between them like a loaded gun. Kip swallowed hard. How long have you known? That you're my son? Since before I reached out last year. That touching father-son reunion? The mentorship offer? All part of the plan. You used me. I gave you a choice, Clayton corrected. Remember what I asked? You want to hurt her? Make her think she's won. The money's gone, isn't it? Kip's voice was barely a whisper. Smart boy. Now here's what happens next. You're going to break her heart. Make her believe you used her, just like she used me. And if I don't? Clayton's smile was all teeth. Then the IRS might become very interested in your undeclared Instagram income. Amazing what a compliance officer can find when he starts digging. You do that? To your own son. I'd do it precisely because you're my son. Clayton moved to the door. Consider it a lesson in consequences. Something I never got to teach you growing up. The Miami Art Warehouse stood like a forgotten monument to fallen glory. Inside, the air hung thick with mold and regret. Gideon Cruz moved between stacks of wrapped canvases, the leftovers of his empire, pieces too worthless to be seized in the original investigation that Valencia's heels echoed on the concrete floor as she paced. Her Valentino dress, chosen for a victory celebration, now seemed like a costume in the warehouse's harsh fluorescent lighting. You don't understand, she was saying, hands cutting through the stale air. Clayton set me up. He knew about everything, including the money you stole from my clients. Gideon's voice carried the weight of decades of disappointment. The ones who trusted me to rebuild after my difficulties? Valencia stopped pacing. Daddy, I needed that money. You know what it's like having to start over, being looked down on? No, Gideon cut her off, turning to face her. You needed the thrill. Just like you needed the thrill of cheating on your husband with that boy. That boy understood me better than Clayton ever did. Did he? Gideon picked up a dusty frame. Or did he understand what you wanted to hear? Where is he now, Mihija? Valencia's silence was answer enough. Kip had disappeared that morning, taking her jewelry collection with him. Don't you dare judge me, she finally spat. You're the one who taught me how this game works. And look where it got us. Gideon gestured at the warehouse. All my life's work reduced to this. Empty frames and broken trust. I was trying to rebuild our name. By stealing? By destroying the little reputation I had left. Gideon's laugh was bitter. I may be a failed art dealer, but at least I never stole from family. No. What about Mom's inheritance? The money that was supposed to be for my college? That was business. This is business too, Valencia shot back. I learned from the best, didn't I, Daddy? You taught me that rules are for people who lack vision. A new voice cut through their argument, smooth as aged bourbon. And that's exactly why you lost. They both turned to see Clayton step out of the shadows, impeccable in his gray suit despite the Miami heat. Hello, Gideon, he said smoothly. We need to talk about your daughter's crimes. Valencia's laugh held an edge of hysteria. You can't prove anything. Actually, Clayton pulled out his phone. I can prove everything. The embezzlement, the fake escrow accounts, all of it. The only question is whether your father wants to go down with you. Gideon's eyes narrowed. What are you offering? Testify against her. Tell the authorities how she used your old business contacts to move stolen money. In return, I'll forgive the debt she created in your name. What debt? Valencia demanded. The money you've been moving through his old accounts, Clayton explained, as if talking to a child. Every transaction left a paper trail leading back to him. The FBI is very interested in how a disgraced art dealer suddenly started handling millions in real estate transactions. Daddy, you can't? How much? Gideon asked quietly. Clayton named a figure that made Valencia gasp. That's impossible. He's lying. No, Gideon said, studying Clayton's face. He's not. That's exactly how much you stole, isn't it? Valencia took a step toward her father. If you do this, you'll what? Gideon's voice was hard. Destroy what's left of my reputation? Break my heart? Too late, Mihija. You already did that. He turned to Clayton. I'll testify, but I want something else in return. Name it. Tell me about the boy. The one who broke my daughter's heart. Clayton's smile was razor-thin. Kip Ralston, 23, fitness influencer. And my son. The silence that followed was deafening. Valencia's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, betrayal, rage. You son of a bitch, she whispered. I learned from watching you and your father, Clayton replied calmly. Family ties make the best weapons, don't they? Tasha's office overlooked Millennium Park, the morning sun painting Chicago's skyline in shades of promise. She stood at the window, reading from a legal document while Clayton sat perfectly still in one of her leather chairs. The prenup is ironclad, she said, turning to face him. Section 7, Paragraph 3. In the event that either party engages in criminal activity resulting in financial harm to others, all marital assets shall be forfeit to the innocent party. I remember the wording, Clayton said. I wrote it myself, and Valencia signed this without questioning it. She was too busy playing the role of the reformed socialite, proving she trusted me. Clayton straightened his already perfect tie. People see what they want to see, Tasha. Valencia saw a boring banker she could manipulate. Her father saw a mark he could exploit. Even my own son saw just another sugar mama to scam. About that, Tasha set down the document. Using your own son to seduce your wife. That's cold, even for you. I gave him a choice. He could help expose the truth, or he could continue living off undeclared Instagram income until the IRS came calling. And the money? The FBI wants to know exactly how you caught her. Clayton's smile was subtle but satisfied. I created a digital honeypot. The account she thought she was stealing from was filled with traceable counterfeit funds. The moment she tried to access them in Miami, it triggered an automatic alert to the authorities. You really never intended to forgive her, did you? Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes, Clayton replied. Valencia didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. Multiple choices, each one calculated to benefit herself at others' expense. Tasha moved to her desk, pulling out another file. Her lawyer is trying to claim entrapment. Let them. Every document is legitimate. Every transaction is real. I simply created an environment where her true nature could reveal itself. The DA wants to know if you'll testify. Of course. Clayton stood, moving to the window. I'll tell them exactly how my wife orchestrated a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, how she used her position as a luxury real estate agent to steal from clients, how she manipulated her father's old contacts to move stolen money. And your son, Kip, will testify too, about how she bragged about stealing from clients, about her plans to flee the country, about everything. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Clayton turned from the window, his expression unreadable. When I was 10, I watched my parents lose their life savings to someone who thought rules were for other people. I promised myself that would never happen again. And Valencia, she's exactly where she belongs, facing the consequences of her actions. The storm broke over Chicago as Clayton sat in his office, watching multiple screens tell the story of Valencia's downfall. His computer displayed a news article about her arrest, security footage of Kip leaving their hotel with her jewelry, and a live feed of Gideon giving his statement to the FBI. His phone buzzed. Tasha. It's done, she said without preamble. The divorce papers are filed, and the prenup clause has been triggered. She loses everything. Good, Clayton said. And the client funds? Already being returned, with interest. The DA is very impressed with your documentation of the fraud. They should be. I've been building this case since before I married her. You know, Tasha's voice softened slightly. Most people would have just divorced her when they discovered the affair. Most people didn't grow up watching their parents lose everything to people who thought rules were beneath them. Clayton's voice was steel. Sometimes justice needs a helping hand. And Kip? What happens to him now? Clayton glanced at another screen, showing his son entering a downtown office building. He starts his new job next week. Entry-level compliance officer. You're hiring him? Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes, as long as they're willing to follow the rules. The storm intensified, rain lashing against his window like tears. Valencia would never see him cry. He had no room for mercy in his heart. That space had been filled long ago with the cold comfort of vindication. Send me the final paperwork when it's ready, he told Tasha. I want this finished before she can think of any more schemes. After hanging up, Clayton opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph of Valencia on their wedding day, looking at him with what he now knew was calculation rather than love. He tore it precisely down the middle and dropped the pieces into his shredder through his window. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the city that had taught him his most valuable lesson. In a world of liars and cheats, the most dangerous man was the one who looked boring enough to underestimate. The rain continued to fall as Clayton turned back to his computer, already focused on his next task. After all, compliance wasn't just about following rules. It was about making sure others paid the price when they didn't. The federal courthouse loomed over downtown Chicago like a stone guardian, its limestone facade weathered by decades of witnessing justice and defeat. Clayton adjusted his tie as he walked up the steps, each movement precise and measured. Inside, the marble halls echoed with his footsteps as he made his way to courtroom 307. Tasha waited by the doors, her dark suit as sharp as her expression. She held a thick leather briefcase, their arsenal of evidence against Valencia. Ready? She asked, studying his face for any sign of hesitation. I've been ready for this moment since the day I met her, Clayton replied, checking his watch. 8 minutes until the trial began. Remember, Tasha said, lowering her voice as other lawyers hurried past. Valencia's lawyer is going to try to paint you as the mastermind. They'll claim you set her up, that this whole thing was an elaborate trap. Let them. The evidence speaks for itself. Clayton straightened his already perfect tie. Every transaction, every fraudulent document, every stolen dollar at all leads back to her choices, not mine. And when they bring up Kip, my son will testify to exactly what he witnessed. A woman so consumed by greed, she didn't notice she was confessing her crimes to the wrong person. The courtroom doors opened, and they entered to find Valencia already seated at the defense table. She wore a modest navy suit, a calculated attempt to appear conservative and trustworthy. Her hair was pulled back severely, her makeup subtle. Gone were the designer labels and flashy jewelry. This Valencia was crafted to appear humble, repentant, her eyes locked on a Clayton as he walked past. You won't get away with this, she hissed, her carefully constructed facade cracking. Clayton didn't even glance her way. I already have. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Harrison entered, a stern woman in her 60s who was known for her zero tolerance of white-collar crime. Clayton had done his research. She'd grown up poor, worked her way through law school, and had no patience for people who abused positions of trust. The prosecutor, Michael Rodriguez, approached the podium. His opening statement was methodical, devastating in its simplicity. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, this case is about trust. Trust between real estate agents and their clients. Trust between business partners. Trust between husband and wife. The evidence will show that the defendant, Valencia Cruz Mercer, violated every one of these trusts in her pursuit of wealth and status. Valencia's lawyer, James Bennett, countered with theatrical indignation. This case is about a calculated campaign of manipulation and entrapment. The evidence will show that Clayton Mercer, a banking compliance officer obsessed with control, orchestrated this entire situation to destroy his wife. The parade of witnesses began. First came the Hendersons, the young couple who'd lost their life savings to Valencia's escrow scheme. We trusted her, Mrs. Henderson testified, her voice breaking. She seemed so understanding about it being our first home purchase. She said she'd protect our deposit personally. Next came the bank officials, the forensic accountants, each one laying out another piece of Valencia's criminal enterprise. Clayton watched the jury's faces as they followed the money trail through offshore accounts, shell companies, and fraudulent escrow holdings. When Kip took the stand, Valencia's composure finally shattered. "You lying little bastard," she shouted as he described their relationship. "You said you loved me." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mrs. Mercer, control yourself, or you will be removed from this courtroom." Kip's testimony was devastating in its details. "She bragged about it," he said, looking directly at the jury, "about how she was smarter than her clients, smarter than her husband. She said rules were for people who lacked vision." When Clayton finally took the stand, Valencia's lawyer stood to cross-examine him, confidence radiating from his expensive suit. "Mr. Mercer," Bennett began, "isn't it true that you orchestrated this entire situation? That you set my client up to fail?" "No," Clayton replied calmly. "I simply documented your client's crimes. But you knew about her activities for months and did nothing to stop them. As a compliance officer, my job is to identify and document suspicious behavior. That's exactly what I did. And the counterfeit money you planted in your joint account." Clayton's expression remained neutral. "I created a secure digital tracking system to protect our assets. When Mrs. Mercer attempted to steal those assets, the system worked exactly as designed. So you admit to trapping her?" "I admit to protecting innocent people from fraud." Clayton's voice carried through the courtroom. "Your client chose to steal from her clients. She chose to embezzle funds. She chose to abuse her position of trust." Valencia stood up suddenly, her carefully crafted image of contrition shattering. "You're a monster." The judge banged her gavel. "Mrs. Mercer, control yourself." Clayton met her eyes. "No, I'm a compliance officer. I follow rules you didn't." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. As the foreperson read the charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, Clayton watched Valencia's face. He saw the moment she realized this wasn't just another game. She could charm her way out of. Judge Harrison's voice cut through the courtroom. "Mrs. Cruz Mercer, you have been found guilty of serious crimes that demonstrate a profound betrayal of trust. Your actions have caused significant harm to innocent people who placed their faith in you. I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison." As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Valencia locked eyes with Clayton one last time. "This isn't over," she mouthed. Clayton checked his watch. Phase 1 was complete. 3 hours after the verdict, Clayton sat in his office, watching the city lights flicker on across Chicago's skyline. His phone rang. Agent Torres from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. "She took the bait," Torres said without preamble. "Just like you predicted. Made contact with a smuggler operating out of Miami." Clayton leaned back in his chair, watching his computer screen where a red moved across a digital map. "And the tracker? Working perfectly. She has no idea that fancy new passport holder you forgot in her lawyer's office has a GPS unit built in. Current location? Private airstrip outside Miami. Our teams are in position, but..." Torres hesitated. "There's something else. She accessed an account we didn't know about. A Cayman Islands trust under her mother's maiden name. Actually," Clayton allowed himself a small smile, "I did know about it. Check the routing number." A moment of keyboard clicking. "Son of a... It's one of yours. A honeypot account I set up 6 months ago. I knew she'd have an emergency fund somewhere, so I created one for her to find. And now we can add attempted flight and accessing fraudulent accounts to her charges," Torres said admiringly. "You really don't leave anything to chance, do you?" "In my experience, Agent Torres, chance favors the prepared mind." Clayton stood, moving to his window. "Keep me updated on the arrest." 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a video call. The feed showed Valencia being led away in handcuffs, her designer escape outfit clashing with the steel around her wrists. The private jet she'd chartered sat idle on the runway, its pilot already singing to the FBI about their arranged flight plan to the Bahamas. "Found her with 3 fake passports and all the jewelry she hadn't already lost to your son," Torres reported. "Plus about 50 grand in cash she thought she'd hidden from the asset freeze." "Any resistance?" "She tried claiming diplomatic immunity. Said she was the wife of some Brazilian businessman." Torres chuckled. "That fell apart when we showed her the marriage license we'd already pulled, the one with your name on it." "Tell me, Clayton said. Did she have the red Hermes bag? Yeah. How'd you know? Inside pocket. There should be a thumb drive. A moment of rustling. Found it. What's on it? Everything, Clayton replied. Her entire client list. Account numbers. Offshore holdings. She thought she was stealing evidence. Instead, she just delivered your next dozen cases. You know, Torres said thoughtfully, most people would have just let her rot in prison for the original charges. Most people don't understand that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. Clayton straightened a pen on his desk. Every person she scammed, every deal she corrupted, they all represent someone else's dreams being stolen. This way, we can make sure she never does it again. Miami's night air hung thick and heavy as Clayton stood across the street from Gideon's art warehouse. The building squatted in the industrial district like a forgotten monument to failed ambitions. He'd been waiting for this moment, counting down the minutes with the same precision he applied to everything else. His phone buzzed a text from his security system. Motion detectors triggered at the warehouse's back entrance. Right on schedule, through his night vision binoculars, he watched Valencia out on bail pinning a appeal slip inside the building. She'd paid off a guard, just as Clayton had anticipated. Just as he'd allowed. Sir, his earpiece crackled with the security team's voice. Subject is accessing the southwest storage room. And the insurance paperwork? Filed this morning. Ownership transfer completed at 3 p.m. Clayton smiled. Maintain surveillance. Do not intervene. Inside the warehouse, Valencia moved with desperate purpose. The security cameras tracked her progress as she methodically poured accelerant along the walls. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by practical black attire. But her movements still held that dancer's grace, even in this final act of destruction. You really think this will hurt me? Gideon's voice made her spin around. He stepped from the shadows, looking older than his 65 years. Daddy. Valencia's voice dripped false sweetness. Come to watch the show? I came to give you one last chance to stop this madness. She laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Stop? When has stopping ever gotten us anywhere? You taught me that, remember? Keep pushing until you win. I taught you to be smart, Gideon countered. This is just spite. No, Valencia's voice hardened. This is justice. You betrayed me. You chose him over your own daughter. You betrayed yourself, Mihija. Everything else followed from that. The first flames appeared exactly 7 minutes later, licking up the walls with the eager hunger of gasoline-fed fire. Clayton watched through his binoculars as Gideon exited through the front entrance. His shoulders slumped, his phone rang. Mr. Mercer? Miami Fire Department. We've got a situation at your property on Northwest 27th Street. My property? Clayton's voice carried just the right note of concern. I just acquired that building. Is it serious? Total loss, sir. But don't worry. Your insurance is already processing the claim. Valencia emerged from the back of the warehouse, coughing but triumphant. She made it 3 steps before Agent Torres stepped out of the shadows. Going somewhere, she spun to run, but found herself surrounded by federal agents, their weapons drawn. Valencia Cruz Mercer, Torres said formally. You're under arrest for arson, insurance fraud, and violation of bail conditions. You don't understand, she began, reaching for her old charm. This building belongs to my father. It's a family matter. Actually, Clayton's voice cut through the night as he crossed the street. I think we understand perfectly. The warehouse's new owner would like to press charges. Valencia's face went slack as realization dawned. New owner. Clayton held up his phone, displaying the ownership transfer documents. As of 3 p.m. today, I own everything your father had left, including this building and its contents. You knew, she whispered. You knew I'd try to burn it. People like you, Clayton said softly, always think you're the smartest one in the room. That makes you predictable. The art, she gestured at the burning building. Everything's gone. No, Clayton's smile was cold. The real art was moved out days ago. What you just burned was a warehouse full of skillfully crafted forgeries, more evidence of your father's past crimes. Quite fitting, don't you think? 1 month later, Clayton stood in his rebuilt brownstone, surrounded by carefully curated art pieces rescued from the warehouse days before Valencia's attempted arson. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, highlighting the subtle brushstrokes of a restored Modigliani that Valencia had once dismissed as worthless. The insurance company's final report came in, Tasha said, examining the painting from her position in one of his leather chairs. They're charging her with attempted fraud on top of everything else. Actual damages? Clayton asked, adjusting the frame until it sat perfectly level. 0. Tasha set down her coffee cup with a precise clink. They're actually quite impressed with how you documented everything. The real arts authentication papers, the timing of the ownership transfer, the security footage of her setting the fire. Details matter. Clayton moved to the next painting, a small Degas that Gideon had hidden away during his downfall. Every piece has been properly authenticated now. Turns out Valencia's father had better taste than even he knew. And better pieces. Tasha stood, moving to examine a particularly striking canvas. The FBI Art Crimes Division was shocked at what you found in that warehouse. Pieces everyone thought were lost. Gideon wasn't a fool, Clayton said. He knew which pieces to hide when his empire crumbled. He just needed the right motivation to reveal them. And now they're all yours. Tasha turned to face him. How many years total is she looking at now? With the arson charges? 20 minimum, plus another decade for the bail violation and attempted flight. You happy now? Clayton smiled, adjusting another frame that hung slightly off level. Balance isn't about happiness. It's about equilibrium. And what about Kip? Have you told him about his new position? Clayton moved to his desk, picking up a framed photo of his son now in a crisp suit, his former Instagram influencer persona replaced by something more substantial. He starts in compliance next week. Entry level, no special treatment. At your bank, where I can keep an eye on him. Clayton straightened his tie in the reflection of a glass frame. Sometimes the best lessons come from watching someone else's fall. Like father, like son. Tasha's voice held a note of challenge. You know, some might say you're just as calculating as she was. The difference, Clayton replied, is that I calculate to protect rules, not break them. He gestured to the morning's Tribune on his desk. Speaking of calculations, have you seen the latest headline? Tasha picked up the paper. The headline read, Mercer donates $1 million to Fraud Victims Fund. Impressive, she said, though I notice it's exactly the amount Valencia tried to steal. Symmetry matters. Clayton moved to the window, watching the Chicago sunrise paint the sky in shades of justice. Everything balances in the end. The Miami Federal Correctional Institution squatted under the Florida sun like a concrete rebuke. Inside, Valencia Cruz Mercer knelt on the common area floor, scrubbing at marks that wouldn't come out. Her orange jumpsuit was a garish contrast to the designer clothes that had once been her armor. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her face bare of the makeup she'd once used as war paint. Cruz Mercer. A guard's voice echoed off the institutional walls. Mail call. Valencia looked up as the guard approached, tossing a newspaper onto her freshly mopped floor. The Chicago Tribune's headline stared up at her like an accusation. Mercer donates $1 million to Fraud Victims Fund. Her hands trembled as she read the article. Clayton's quote jumped out at her. Rules exist to protect people from those who would abuse trust for personal gain. This fund ensures that lesson won't be forgotten. The article went on to detail how Clayton had not only donated the exact amount she'd attempted to steal, but had also established a whistleblower program at his bank to catch future fraudsters. The final paragraph mentioned his promotion to Chief Compliance Officer and his son's new position in the department that Valencia's scream of rage echoed off the prison walls. But Clayton wasn't there to hear it. He was in his office, reviewing compliance reports, ensuring that in his world, at least every number added up perfectly. Mr. Mercer? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your son is here for the morning briefing. Send him in. Kip entered, his demeanor a world away from his influencer days. He carried a stack of reports and a determination to prove himself worthy of more than just his father's name. I've been reviewing the Henderson case, Kip said, taking a seat. Found some patterns that might help prevent similar frauds. Show me? As Kip laid out his findings, Clayton felt a satisfaction deeper than revenge. This was true balance, turning even the tools of deception into instruments of protection. That on his desk, beside the latest audit reports, sat a small plaque. It read, Clayton Mercer, Chief Compliance Officer. Below it, in smaller text, balance in all things. The morning sun streamed through his window, casting long shadows across the polished surface of his desk. In the distance, Chicago's financial district rose like a forest of glass and steel, a monument to the rules that govern success and failure, right and wrong, victory and defeat. Clayton straightened a stack of papers, aligning their edges with mathematical precision. In the end, everything was about balance. Those who disturbed it would eventually fall. Those who maintained it would prosper. That he opened his computer, beginning another day of enforcing the rules others thought they could break. After all, compliance wasn't just his job. It was his justice. Through his window, he could see storm clouds gathering over Lake Michigan, promising rain. Somewhere in a Miami prison cell, Valencia was learning the hardest lesson of all. In a world of calculated risks and measured responses, the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one who broke the rules. That IT was the one who knew how to use them.